and welcome to Swinging from the Hips, episode 4. We're up to great milestone of number 4, and this is your place for everything cricket, for your cricketing fix. Joining us today's show will be Hussein Hanif, but our regular presenters, welcome Rohit and Taryn. How are you guys doing?
How's it?
Very well,
Very
thank you.
good. Very
Good, awesome. Look, we're going to crack into it. We are having a few, just so people are aware, we are having a few technical difficulties getting Hussein on. So Paul's busily working on, our production team is working on getting him in there. But while we're waiting for Hussein to join us, let's go with This Week in History. And Rohit, what was happening this week in history in cricket?
Well, we've got a few things here to cover. So back in 9th of May 1977, Kerry Packer's circus plans for World Series cricket was leaked after he was denied the broadcasting rights. But only after 17 months passing by, he ended up getting the rights anyway and changed the face of world cricket, which was pretty good for us. And had to go hunting for this one. Back in 2003, West Indies bet the Aussies in the 4th test, chasing a record 418 runs to win. Aussies were on top of in the match, and Windies lost Brian Lara for 60 with the score at 165 after being 74 for 3, and then ended up winning the match by 3 wickets. So that was an amazing feat to win the 4th innings chase there. And just one other thing that I want to mention is about the birthdays for this week. Born 8th of May 1983 in Colonel, Andhra Pradesh, India, before moving with the family to Auckland. One Tarun Nathula, who's played for Central Districts, Northern Districts, Auckland, New Zealand A, New Zealand 11 Black Caps. He debuted for the Black Caps at Cobham Oval in Whangarei. Went on to play 5 ODIs where he took 5 wickets with
five
of
points
2.
on the 5.
What's that?
Really spread on the 5.
5 wickets.
5!
Best bowling of 2 for 41 with the bat. He averaged 9 in his very limited opportunities he's had. But outside cricket, he's involved in some way at Mount Roskill Grammar School and Kemu Cricket. But his greatest move was when he joined the crew of Swinging from the Hip. Happy birthday, Tarun.
Hey, happy birthday.
32. You didn't mention how old though. 32.
32
No.
again.
We'll let him work it out. I gave him the date.
No, God, let's face it. Most of our Asian population is good at maths, so they're going to work it out.
Yeah.
Hey, look, and also, look, we can't pass by. Was a big moment in world cricket, and that was that 1977 moment when the World Series with Kerry Packer. Basically, he changed the face. We got coloured clothing. We got night cricket. We got basically out of that, as I joked off air to Rohit, it's just like, World Series cricket goes to IPL. I am your father. So, really, a lot of the developments that we have in cricket today go back to that era in 1977 when Kerry Packer pulled all the best players in the world together and created a circus called World Series cricket.
Well, yeah, and it was the best thing that revolutionised the game, didn't it, at the time?
Absolutely. Well, you look at the development in terms of strike rates, right? And it's just like, if you go back when we would have started, like Rohit and myself, Taryn, probably the strike rates were a little bit better. But two runs and over for a test match, 2 runs and over, 180 runs in a day of test match cricket. And and these days, you're getting 300 a day for test cricket now, and the flow-on effects from IPL and ODIs into test cricket.
Well, exactly. 100 a session is what you're expecting these days in test match cricket. But even watching some of that old footage of the World Series lately, it seemed like pretty slow going, even in those one days. I mean, the ball nowadays, players even dive, meters away from the ball, and back then it was just an amble. So just watching the way the players played back then to comparing it to now, it's amazing.
Even you put the cricket aside as an entertainment package or as a product, as an entertainment product. That before my time, but that did revolutionize cricket. Cricket in colored clothing, cricket under lights, attractive time for audiences to actually go down and watch the cricket. That whole thing, I think, changed the face of how people viewed cricket. I mean, granted, we still had black and white television, so you couldn't really tell the color. But, you know, looking back on those videos now, it is way more attractive. And obviously, that Kerry Packer series was followed by the 92 World Cup. Quite possibly the best World Cup, you know? So, yeah, big moment in history.
I don't know if I go along with the best World Cup. We got knocked out in the semis.
No. Yeah, exactly. Only team to lose to the World Cup our winners, actually. That's
we lost to the World Cup winners.
Twice.
Right. So actually, moving along. So we'll follow up with the news this week in modern history. So let's say what's been happening this week, Torrin?
We'll start with the impacts of COVID. So, South African women's cricket team was scheduled to tour the Caribbean towards the end of May. That's now been put off for the foreseeable future. South African A team was meant to go as a precursor to their national team's tour to the Caribbean in June. That's also been postponed because you've got South Africa going through a 7-week lockdown, the airports are closed, etc. We then move into the Women's World Cup qualifiers. There was a scheduled tournament in Sri Lanka, 10-team World Cup qualifier, with the 3 teams from there progressing on to the main event in New Zealand early next year. That's also been postponed. You've got the Under-19 World Cup qualifiers in Europe, Africa, etc., all being postponed at this stage. Luckily, the EAP, East Asia Pacific qualifiers, they haven't been postponed because they never had a date set for them. But along the COVID front, there have been some developments. St. Vincent and Grenadines have actually come on, and they're starting what's called a Vinci Premier T20 League. That starts on the 22nd of May. So going back to the 15th of March when we had the last official cricket game, which was between Karachi Kings and Quetta Qalandars in the PSL. That was the last one. This would be the first game of cricket from a full member nation. Take away Vanuatu, the wonderful work Vanuatu have done. Outside of that, this will be the first real cricket competition that's going to be held. That will now be held at Arnos Vale Sports Complex, St. Vincent and Grenadines. Incidentally, they're going to trial no saliva on the cricket ball. And for those that are interested, the recognizable names at this tournament will be Kesrick Williams, you know, the guy who likes to get his handkerchief out and write people's names or pretend to write the wickets he gets on the hand. But really good footage, fantastic footage if you get the chance. YouTube Kesrick Williams and Chadwick Walton. It's funny. So he'll be there. Sunil Umbris, another West Indian player, he'll be playing in it. The way this has come about is through the president of St. Vincent and Grenadines Cricket Association, Kishore Shallow, who also happens to be the vice president of Cricket West Indies. He was approached by Dream 11, which is an Indian production company. They wanted some content streamed into India, which is how this has come to fruition. These games will now be played. The funny part is they'll be played 8:30 a.m. local time until 2 p.m. local time. 8:30 a.m. till 2 p.m. Obviously, they're not worried about viewership. I quickly Googled, hang on, what does that mean into India? That translates to a 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Indian viewership time. So it's prime time Indian viewing. So it's fully produced, and it's produced. We joked last week when Taz was here saying, look, our domestic players will happily play at midnight if there's a couple of zeros added next to their paycheck.
Yep.
Similar kind of thing. So good on them. At least we'll get some cricket going. And for those that are into punting, there's a bit of cricket to punt on. On a serious note, Babar Azam has now been named the white ball captain of Pakistan. Azhar Ali did have the test captaincy, but back late last year, you might have noticed Sarfaraz Ahmed was removed from captaincy, and
Yep.
they knew he was removed from the Test and the T20s, but nobody knew what was going to happen in the ODI space. But Babar Azam has now taken on white ball, so T20s and ODI. So congratulations to him. Pakistan have also announced their contracts list. Full list is obviously available on Quick Info. Do they take the time and go on there? But the big movers and shakers are Hassan Ali, Wahab Riaz, and Mohammad Amir. All three of them, big names, biggish names, quite a big name, lost their contracts on the PCB contract list. Yes, Mohammad
That's
Amir retired
massive.
from Mohammad Amir and Wahab Riaz both retired from red ball cricket. So that is possibly what drove that one. Demotions for Sarfaraz Ahmed from A list to B list. Yasir Shah, their biggest spin bowling threat,
Yep.
A to B, and Imam Ul Haq, who's the nephew of Inzamam Ul Haq, who's the chief selector, goes from contract B to contract C. Promotions for Sheen Shaheen Freedy, no surprises there, and Azhar Ali also taking on the captaincy mantle. They go up from B to A. Big winners, wildcard picks, you might say. Naseem Shah, the 16-year-old who debuted last summer against Australia.
Australia.
And I'll probably start with 16-year-old.
He is
Right.
16-year-old.
He
just for the
was.
people, listening on podcast, there were air quotes there around 16-year-old.
Yeah, 16-year-old. The guy who's 3 years older than my son bowling a 150 clicks, that guy. Yeah,
Yep.
he's
Yeah.
got a contract. And we also touched on the BBL wildcard Harris Ralph, who played and did fantastically well for Melbourne Stars. He's also got himself a emerging contract. Finally, closer to home, there was this talk of including England into the Trans-Tasman bubble for cricketing purposes come next summer. So we could potentially see a three-way series between England, Australia, and New Zealand, with talk of England coming here first, quarantining, and then moving backwards and forwards. So that's what's happening or has happened over the week.
That's actually, that last one's quite an interesting one. If we can get a unified bubble with Australia, that actually opens up quite a lot of possibilities in terms of sports across our extended bubble for just like England's doing coming in.
Yeah. Look, I think they'd have quite a few people inviting them.
Yep.
Because they are a draw card. I'd be surprised if India don't invite them. But the talk is around, look, if the T20 World Cup gets postponed to Feb or late Feb, why wouldn't you just turn up in New Zealand and play some games here, prepare accordingly, right?
Absolutely.
And then go to Australia. But hey, look, we're pretty much geniuses, right? We said this 4 weeks ago.
Oh, absolutely. You're hearing it here first on Swinging from the Hip, aren't you? That's the
4
thing.
weeks
We
ago,
are.
had you been on this show 4 weeks ago, we called us. So no
Absolutely.
surprises. Let's move on.
Let's move on, indeed. Let's move on, because waiting in the green room is our guest for tonight, Hussain Hanif, who's so just a bit of background behind him. He's born in New Zealand. He's a cricket coach, and as well as being a diversity inclusion specialist. What does that mean? We're going to find out. But look, the last 10 years he spent in Australia with Cricket Victoria and Cricket Australia, creating pathways to encourage people with disabilities, ethnic and Indigenous backgrounds to get involved in the game that we love, to play cricket. He's also coached the Australian Intellectual Disabled team and has been the winner of the Victorian Sports and Cricket Australia Coach of the Year Award in 2016-17. Welcome, Hussain Hanif.
Hey guys.
Hi, and hopefully I've got all that right. And how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Sorry, had some technical difficulties there from my end.
No, that's all good. That's all good. It's a all this technology for us old people like me anyway. It's all very overwhelming. Look, that's quite a great CV that you've accumulated. And obviously you're still a young man. So how does it feel to have been involved in so many elements of the game?
Yeah, look, I think it's provided an opportunity, I think, for to showcase skills that normally we sort of learn things and we're unable to sort of put them into practice. So essentially, it's learning off good people, and Taran is one of them. Growing up in Mount Roskill, I think he was one of them that,
Roskill
you know,
massive.
yeah, Roskill massive. We sort of looked up to, and I think that's provided sort of a pathway in terms of for myself coaching anyway, but for younger ones, it's playing and so forth as well. So I think cricket is a great sport that unites communities and it brings people together. And I think one of the big ones is in New Zealand, especially, is that we see diversity different to Australia. I would feel anyway, is that we don't put people in boxes and silos, whereas in Australia, you said there, disability, multicultural, Indigenous, LGBTI, all those spaces we work in, but they're all in little silos as well. So it's just sort of, it sort of fell in place, really, to be honest. And then just been given great opportunities.
Look, we'll get into that all that diversity side of things, as well as Women's Big Bash, very shortly. But what we thought, while we've got you on, and the fact that you spent so much time in Australia as well, you've got to obviously know the Australian setup quite well. And we thought we might get a bit of a rundown on how is the Australian structure, and also the impacts that COVID-19's basically had on that structure. I mean, obviously, the thing that's been in the news is the financial things, but look, let's start with the structure a bit so that people can get an understanding of how the Australian structure works. We've got Cricket Australia at the top, and then you've got the state associations. What's it, 6 of them? And then they're answering back to Cricket Australia.
That's correct. Yeah. So similar model to what we have here in New Zealand.
And how does that filter down? Obviously, because the states, then you basically, for one, let's take it like a northern districts or central districts model, isn't it? Because then you've got within that a Hawke's Bay, for Central Hawke's Bay, as well as Palmerston North, New Plymouth, and you bring it together. How do they manage to bring all those elements together and keep tabs on it effectively?
Yeah, essentially, it's centrally based. So Cricket Australia is based in Victoria. But each of the states have their own, I guess, setup in that sense. Similar model to what we have here in New Zealand. But at the end of the day, I think funding is the big one, and funding comes from Cricket Australia and allows the states to do what they want. And the same issues here. I know Taran would be going through at the moment, age and stage, they call it, where junior formats they want to change. Now, the national body makes the change, and it's up to the states to implement them. If you don't, you pull the string and you say, we're taking your money off you. In the same sense, female cricket and whatnot as well. But you want to also keep the national body happy at the same time. And if you do, that allows you to have pathways. It allows more players to play national cricket, and everyone's aligned in that same sense as well.
And I suppose at the end of the day, the strategies that the national body has come up with is in the best interest of the game, and so it should have a flow-on effect if you implement those to the letter that they've sort of prescribed.
Yeah, spot on. So I guess a prime example is disability cricket in itself. Australian cricket, I think 2015 took on a mantra where cricket is a sport for all, the hashtag a sport for all, and CommBank jumped on board, threw a whole lot of money into it, but it was up to the states to bring a deaf, an intellectual disability team, and a blind team to a national carnival. Now, for that to happen, you need all the states to buy in. You need productive grassroots people actually providing opportunities in terms of getting them to play the game. But then they're wearing a national shirt, a state shirt as well. They're wearing a Victorian V, the Tasmanian Tiger shirt or whatnot. So essentially, it presents an opportunity. But it's up to the states to then actually buy in and bring those teams along as well.
And then you mentioned CommBank, so probably a good time to sort of but go into the COVID-19 impacts that they're seeing across Australia. Look, we're hearing a lot in the news with Usman Khawaja getting upset about pay cuts, etc., for staff, etc. Players cuts haven't seemed to have flowed through. I could be wrong on that one. I'm not sure where that's at. And then obviously the state association negotiations. Whilst you've got the association themselves with 50 mil in the bank, a Ford facility from CommBank for 50 mil, and then the possibility of 350 mil series with India. So how's the financial situation with COVID-19 playing out across the Tasman?
Yeah, it's different states. So I think, look, personally, I can only talk about Victoria. I know that everything's sort of waiting on the India, series, and from what we're hearing internally from, as you mentioned, I think 300 to 350 mil, and they're doing whatever they can in that sense to get Kohli and the troops over. So essentially, that covers costs. I know, sort of seen on the show is how much impact India has on world cricket and the amount of money that can bring in revenue. We're just talking today in terms of New Zealand, for example, how much revenue they would have made by having India tour here, and what sort of impact did that have essentially on them touring as well. But Australia or Victoria in a dire sort of strait at the moment. It's I think it was around 2015. Victorian cricket invested heavily in terms of developing more people in the grassroots. So essentially, they put more people. We have 12 regions and a breakup of Victoria. In that region, they have a CAT, which is a coach and talent ID specialist. So, and then they'll have a participation officer, a club officer, which delivers and delivers on club programs, a cricket manager, and an area manager. So essentially, all those resources were put into the grassroots. They were funding that was provided from the players as well to support grassroots. They did that for 3 to 4 years, and then they noticed that they weren't getting, they were getting the participation numbers because there was more eyes and ears. There was more pathways in terms of players, that were being recognized in that sense, but they weren't getting a return reward in that sense as well. So they've now shifted their model. So a lot of the press is saying that because of COVID, this has sort of happened, but like any institution or organization, essentially, if it's not working, you change your model. And I think it's the right time to change the model. It's just that right time. I went through the same before working in cricket at Honeywell, analytics, and I was one of those unlucky people. But essentially, it was part of business at the end of the day. Victorian cricket is in a healthy position. It's not like per se they have got money in the bank. They've got a new multi-million-dollar facility. It's just bad management of funds at the top end that has allowed them to sort of show that, they've got these people in the grassroots now. How can we get more participants playing the game? But how can that equate also into more money generating out of the game as well? So if you look at early learning programs, Woolworths invested, for example, a year ago, Milo pulled out, and Woolworths, for example, took over, which is, I think, here called Countdown. They've got the big W in New Zealand, and they took over, and essentially that's revenue stream for a club, and that's revenue stream for Victorian cricket and Australian cricket in that sense as well. So, there is money in the bank for Victorian cricket. It's very unfortunate that staff, especially people that I worked with, is let go, but it also presents an opportunity for Victorian cricket to be stronger. There's going to be less staff in the grassroots, which means it's sad because more clubs aren't going to see a cricket manager, a participation officer, a coach and talent ID officer coming down, but it also presents more opportunities for clubs per se to become stronger, especially premier clubs to become stronger in Victoria.
Hussein, firstly, well done on getting out of there before the pay cuts hit. But no, just saying that. Well done on getting out and coming across before the pay cuts hit, right? Tell us, with all that's going to happen, who do you think is going to struggle? Is it premier clubs, or is it rep sport or women's cricket, or where are they going to feel the squeeze up front going into next season?
Yeah, in Victoria alone, I think it'll be the grassroots. So essentially, we've got a lot of associations, whereas, say, for example, per se in Auckland, we got the one association essentially, and then that looks after all the clubs. So we've got multiple associations in Victoria where they're going to be hit now. So they don't have eyes and ears, in the grassroots. It's going to be a harder to become a rep cricketer because there's no rep tournaments anymore. But also in the same respect, I think, the less you have in the grassroots is in people turning up and actually putting in effort, volunteers driving it, the more impact it's not going to have, in that sense as well. So I think they're the ones that are going to get hit. But it also means that premier cricket becomes stronger. You need good people investing, and they got to know what they're doing essentially, and they got to replace the people that were there before.
Just want to take a step back, actually, in terms of understanding something, because a new concept. I mean, it's been around for. I mean, what are we up to? Big Bash 6, 7, 8, 9? I can't remember, but
TBL 8.
8. Oh, I nearly got there. Now, obviously, prior to Big Bash, each state had its association, and when you're playing one-day cricket or even T20, when it was back before Big Bash, one team per state. With Big Bash now, with Victoria and New South Wales having 2 teams in the Big Bash, how's that work? Are they run by Cricket or a franchise that's given out by Cricket Victoria, or are they directly back to Cricket Australia?
No, they're created out of the states. So essentially, Victorian cricket, we had 2 franchises, but we had per se, we call them clubs rather than franchises because they're invested in. So it's similar to Auckland, I guess, the Hearts and the Aces. They're actually internal, but what happened was when they actually started like franchises. They had their own offices. They weren't part of it. Game market development and marketing was separate, for example, throughout the season. And they would bring in more stuff just to deliver on game match awareness and functions and so forth. What happened over the last 24 months was they sacked the general managers. So this is, they sacked the general managers and they embedded it into Victorian cricket, sorry. So essentially, I can only speak, as I was saying, in regards to Victoria itself, but that had a huge impact. That was massive in the sense that, yes, we're taking away from this franchise type model, but also in the same respect, I get to go into a grassroots program and I can wear red or I can promote red straight away. I don't have to go to A, B, and Z to say, to
get approval.
Are we able to promote? Correct. So essentially embedded, that makes our community programs that I was working on a lot smoother as well. So we set up things like Melbourne Renegades Champions League. So we saw a small proportion of South Asians. We had Gurinder Sandhu, Usman Khawaja Farwad, for example. But we had a large population of multicultural kids that were playing and great cricketers in Premier and sub-district cricket, but they weren't being pushed into into Big Bash cricket. So we created models that we could then, or sort of programs that can then push these guys, fast track them into the system. So we didn't have to go through the Renegades hierarchy. We just did it through Cricket Victoria, which was a lot easier in that sense.
How do they maintain the sort of autonomy of the organisations then, in terms of the Stars and the Renegades? Because like I said, you haven't got the general managers. How is who's going to be picked up for which? Well, I'm going to use the term franchise just so we can, people can maintain the understanding of it, right? So which players are going to go towards the Renegades franchise and who's going to the Stars franchise? Because now, effectively, you're all under the one umbrella.
Yeah, and that's where Cricket Victoria have changed it to. So essentially, they're in a dire strait. They've got one general manager. So last year, they cut all the 2 general managers for the clubs. They brought in one who was Nick Cummins, who was looking after Thunder when they first originally year 2, year 3, year 4, I think it was, and then 5 and 6 he went to the Hobart Hurricanes, and he had a great stint there. Essentially, what it did though is that it presented opportunities for Cricket Victoria to actually run these teams, franchises per se, through Cricket Victoria, programs aligned, pathways, coaches, and so forth. But they're in a dire strait at the moment. So Nick Cummins is now, not Nick Cummins, the rugby player, by the way, is now the general manager. The first thing I thought when he got signed up, but no, he literally looks after both teams. Now, Nick Cummins, I'll give you a prime example. Last year, Dal Steyn gets injured, and Nick Cummins is connected to Lahore Qalandars in Pakistan. So Lahore Qalandars play against Sydney Thunder in a series they set up, I don't know how many years ago. It was sort of like an exchange where players come and they train it with the Thunder squads and that. And Harris Ralph had been playing training with the Hobart Hurricanes, and he'd be playing T20 cricket as a franchise player for their premier system. What had happened was obviously a phone call gets made the next day. He's a superstar. That was it. That Nick Cummins was a key connection. That player could have gone anywhere, because when I was working for the Renegades at the particular time, my role was community engagement head of community engagement, so in Victoria and the northwestern suburbs. And we would have loved to have Harris because Harris Ralph is Pakistani. We've got a high population of Pakistani community. So essentially, Usman Shinwari pulls out. Pakistan say he's going to play Test cricket now. So Renegades signed this, him up. And there was another Pakistani player they signed, and he didn't pull through as well. So Ralph would have been perfect. But, Nick Cummins had a connection with the Stars, made that connection and said, here you go. So it's going to cause a little bit of dramas, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it also presents opportunities like that one did there for more players from foreign countries to come and play as well.
Just going to sort of like, I think just taking an element of what you've sort of said with the ethnicities and the like, one thing I noticed with going through the multicultural page, for want of a term, for Cricket Victoria, in terms of, I'll just get this right. Oh, geez, look, I'll get to the, we made the notes and then I didn't have them there. The International Student Academy. So, that's going to your TAFEs, which is obviously like your technical colleges, and getting ethnicities involved in the game who love the game but just not involved. So how's that working, and obviously what impact is that having?
Yeah, so essentially we had a massive student base that weren't playing cricket. So they were coming as students, especially, for example, the Nepalese community, for example. We had a high population now. They've outnumbered the UK or English students that were coming and actually studying. So that gives you a prime example.
Are they international students, or are they actually sort of residents, or what's
international students? Yeah, international students. So they'd come across, for example, and they're cricket-loving people. So for us, it's how we can, connect these people into Cricket Victoria and especially the Big Bash franchises straight away. So essentially for us, though, it was an opportunity. They were coming as students. You get them involved in our game and get them to understand what Victorian cricket can do for them. At the end of the day, the Big Bash is a long season. We need people to buy seats and be a part of cricket as well. So it was a two-pronged thing, I guess, at the end of the day. And I guess at the end of the day, they're cricket-loving, as I mentioned before, so it's an easy sell. 4-week skills programs, we get them into development programs so they can become umpires, so they can get funding, so they don't have to work at their local McDonald's and whatnot. They can actually umpire on a Saturday as well. So we're embedding them into the culture of cricket.
Yeah, giving them something different.
Conversion rate? Well, sorry, Ashwin. What's the conversion rate? What's the conversion rate on these students? Right, you give them opportunities to be involved in cricket. How many of them actually take on this opportunity, and how many actually progress on, and not just on a playing front, umpiring, coaching, managing, whatever that might be, in a paid capacity? What is the conversion rate? Just roughly.
Yeah, there's no real conversion rate, to be honest. Like, there wouldn't be a particular number because we've got so many associations. They could be in different associations, umpiring, coaching, or playing. What we did, though, is look at do we have enough students or South Asians, for example, in coaching? And if you look at the premier structure, we've probably got one, Keith Jans, in Frankston, coaching, and he was a coach, sorry. But so then it presents opportunities for them to be involved in the game. But essentially, if we don't provide those opportunities, especially when they're coming in first year, second year students, then they're not connected into understanding what Victorian cricket is. One of the key things is we understood that they weren't really understanding what a state body does, because in India or in Nepal or whatnot, they just go out and they play cricket, Azad Madan, sort of cricket style, tape ball and so forth. So we were getting them to understand what our structure is first. And we're getting to know what they want, essentially. Then we provide them opportunities. So things like, community coaching courses was a brilliant one. They presented us community coaching, we presented them, community coaching courses, free community coaching course. Then they can go out and run Woolworths Cricket Blast or Milo equivalent. They get paid their $120 or whatever it is. They umpire on a Saturday, $150, or if they're good enough, they connect it into clubs. One of the things I found when going to Victoria was it was just hard to turn up to a premier club and play cricket. So essentially, this will be an open door sort of opportunity. The best ones, they come through and they show their skills and go, well, you were actually really good, so here's an opportunity for you to progress in that sense as well. And a lot of the students, especially Deakin, there was 2 guys that actually played IPL cricket. So it was like, these guys are students. They're in Melbourne. How do we get them to play? One actually played with Ryan Ninan. If he is no doubt, he always tunes in everywhere to do with cricket. Ryan Ninan played with Virat Kohli in I think year 1, year 2 of the IPL. So it was a really and they come over as Deakin students essentially. They're then opportunities for these guys to then progress as well.
So you're saying Deakin students. So I'll just finish with the Deakin students there. So you got Deakin students. That's not a international sort of. I mean, that's a proper university for want of a term, isn't it?
Correct.
I mean, like, just so that people that are listening, whether outside of Australia in particular, this is like Deakin University is for New Zealand. It's a University of Auckland. It's a high quality education place. So you've got people coming along for an education there that have got other abilities as well.
Correct.
Yeah. Rohit, sorry, where you go?
Yeah, I was going to just say, like, you mentioned like the Nepalese market and that as far as ethnicities go. What about outside of the traditional ethnicities? What sort of work is being done over there in Victoria about trying to attract other ethnicities into the game and growing in those markets?
Yep. So
Rohit, what country would you like to see playing cricket?
What country would I like to see playing cricket? Well, I'm just trying to see there's a lot of there's a lot of Aborigines and that other ethnicities in Australia, like you got the Greeks and that as well. And where I'm sort of coming from is because in New Zealand we've got a really big Pacific Island base that just don't seem to make it in cricket for some reason.
Yep.
And look, these guys are damn talented at playing cricket, but for some reason after they finish their school, they just don't keep going and progressing. And we're missing out locally on really good talent. And
that's good. Like, I'm glad you asked that, but how many players of a certain ethnicity would we have to see? Hassan's laughing. Would we have to see to say, oh yeah, that's the true representation of our community?
I'll give you
how many numbers do you want to see?
Rohit, I'll give you an example. You see the Greek, so player of the tournament for the Big Bash. I'll give you guys a guess.
Stoinis.
Exactly. It's a Greek background. So essentially, like he's a WA boy, played in Northcote where I played Premier Cricket. I didn't know he was Greek. The Indigenous captain of Victoria, Abertangelo. Now, Abertangelo, you wouldn't think it's Indigenous. I mean, that it presents those opportunities. But also, I think the other thing is, is the non-traditional countries, for example, you sort of look at like a China, for example, we've got a high population of Chinese, even here. When are we going to see our next, I know Tarun will probably know, Danny Wong, who played cricket for Eden Ross School.
The other day. It was his birthday 2 days ago.
Really? There you go. So, when was the last time we saw an Asian cricketer play in Auckland, for example, which is a high population?
Mark Chapman.
Or Chappie, yeah, but Chappie,
he's got an English connection.
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. Mother is Seychelles Chinese.
Brilliant. And I mean, that's the thing. The other thing is that in my particular role, the reason the role was created was to cater for the 50% of the population that was multicultural. So one parent was born overseas. So looking at that, how can we get more coaches, more players, more female players, for example, more umpires, more board members, because they are the key. I'm learning this now in Auckland cricket. You need more diverse board members to actually make a difference in the grassroots. And I'll be honest, and that's what's not happening in Australia. So essentially, the more we can get people from ethnicity and those ethnicities in the system, the better the system's going to be. Now, the Chinese, for example, was one that really strung to me, and people go, your role as multicultural or diversity head, you should be engaging. Well, reality is in that particular region, the Indian community is not playing cricket. So, we shouldn't be tackling the non-traditional communities if we can't get the traditional communities playing the game at the moment. Sri Lankans weren't playing, for example. So essentially, it's a hard one.
Go to your strengths first before you start to go out wider.
But why weren't they playing in those areas? Why weren't the traditional?
Yeah, there was. So, for example, there wasn't many hustlers in those regions. In the same sense, it just needed a lot of love. Victoria's a big place. I mean, country and metro. As I said, we split them into 12 regions. At current point, Victorian cricket today, I think there was 42 losses of staff, so they're down to 12. So essentially, that's going to get worse.
That's double Auckland. That's double Auckland staff.
Yeah, well, Auckland staff, you've got 5 million people in Melbourne alone. So you sort of say that's the whole country. But essentially, what they had 4 staff or 5 staff per region, and now they've got 4 staff, in sort of cluster areas. I think one of the staff members mentioned to me now with these cuts, it's 5 hours to drive from one end to the other. So it's going to be really difficult to look after the sort of clubs and the associations in those regions.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, look, I want to go back to that question though, Rohit and Hussein.
Yeah.
How many for Auckland? How many players of colour, for the lack of a better term, do we need to see in an Auckland side to be able to say, oh yeah, look, we must be doing well on our ethnic drive or engaging with our market? What do we need to see?
I think you marry it. My personal opinion. Sorry, Roy, I jumped in there.
No, you go for it.
Comparison of the Premier system, and also in terms of how many people we have living here, for example, or playing the game in that sense. So a true representation of how much percentage of people are living in the particular state, and also how many are playing at the highest level in terms of Premier cricket. From a grassroots level, though, would know that South Asian kids in Mount Roskill to wherever, like, they'd all be playing cricket, whether at Cornwall or wherever, all these Premier clubs, at cricket clubs essentially. But
that's
at the top level,
that's changing. Cricket's got to catch up. We've got to be careful that there's a lot of assumptions made. It's almost, or don't want to get political about just general political, but it's changing where we need to get away from the assumption that they're Indian, they'll play cricket. That's fine. I shouldn't say Indian. They're East Indian descent, so they'll play cricket. That covers everyone. Right? You can't just assume that. There's a lot of kids. I work at a very multicultural school. They play football first, basketball second. The guys that play cricket are recent immigrant, or children of recent immigrant families. The ones that came here when they were 5 or 6, or the ones that have done their primary schooling in New Zealand, they don't necessarily see cricket as their number one sport anymore. So we've got to be very careful on how we go about that space.
I was going to say, that's what I was going to come back to in terms of that question, what you put out there. How many players do you have to see of an ethnicity in a say the Auckland Aces before you say, it's successful? Actually, no, you got to go back to grassroots. You got to say, you just want to get your numbers saturated at a grassroots level, and you're going to have your flow-on effect. As long as you've got certain parameters in place going up the chain, you're going to see the flow-on effect if you've got that saturation happening in an ethnicity at a grassroots level. So don't focus on performance at the top level. At the end of the day, if you want to see a certain group represented, you got to get that saturation happening to find that golden nugget in that group that's going to then represent at that top level, isn't it? Because you don't just want a representation for representation's sake.
The reason I asked that was it was a bit loaded in the sense, I think it was 3 years ago, we'd had a game in Napier. I was playing for the Auckland side, and I think long story short, we must have won the competition, the 4-day comp last time when Auckland won it, and we were looking around the changing room, and we thought, oh, hang on, this is awesome. We had Mark Chapman in the side, half Chinese, half European. Jeet Raval and myself, both immigrants, and Sean Solia, who's half Samoan. And Jeet and I were like, oh, hang on, this is actually a very true representation of Auckland as a community. You had Pacific Islanders, Indians, Chinese, and Europeans.
One thing I'll say there, T, is that I think in Australia they sell things better. They would have been all over the news. They would have been, it's one thing I've learned. They just don't tunnel vision. But you have to. Role models are built on those things as well, right? Is Tarun is South Asian and he's Indian and this guy's Samoan, and I need to promote that. We can't still be talking about Murphy Saw and the likes when you've actually got Sean Talia, you know.
Shawnee,
But
2 years
how
ago,
much has been done to promote them?
yeah, look, Shawnee 2
So-
years ago went on and played for Samoa in the East Asia Pacific qualifiers in 2018. I think 2018. Yes, he represented Samoa and played in the qualifiers. They didn't qualify. PNG got through, but Shawnee played. There's Tuagaga from Wellington. He didn't play, but last year at the South Pacific Games, James Baker, he played. Who's the opening bowler for ND? He's played. So, talking about low hanging fruit, Samoans are probably the best bet if you want to target anybody in Auckland outside of your traditional markets.
And they already got the hand-eye coordination and so forth.
Absolutely.
To
We got
play,
Khalid-
especially in the
You got Khalid. Oh, I can't say it now. Someone cricket. Yeah. Hey, look, I'm gonna move it along there. We've got a few other things that we might be able to come back to some of these topics, but there's a couple other things that we really want to cover off, and time's running away on us real quick. Look, my understanding, you're involved with the Big Bash, women's Big Bash cricket as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate with Cricket Australia and Cricket Victoria winning the Community Coach of the Year, and that allowed me to do some work with, at the time, Dimitri Mascarenas and Andrew McDonald, some coaching sessions and so forth, but also just opened my, I guess, insight in terms of what the Big Bash is and what this big beast is essentially. But it also opportunities to coaching as well.
Because when you look at women's sport, Australia seems to be making great strides, generally speaking, in terms of the exposure that those women's sports are getting. And the Big Bash, women's Big Bash, is probably one of them. They're getting some pretty decent crowds. What are they doing different, or what are not different, because it's really it's a beginning point for everybody, really. So what are they doing well that's achieving some of those big crowds and getting that following happening?
So essentially, I think we're in the 5th edition now, or last year was the 5th edition. What they did was, and that was a standalone season last year. So I think you spoke earlier in a show about, the first or second show in regards to WBBL and games, games before the men's games. That was a cheaper, viable option, and it allowed in a different sense, like audience to watch female sports and then have an opinion, rather than putting on TV, low TV numbers, and then that doesn't generate, in terms of revenue and sponsorship in that sense as well. What it did though, last year, it taught us a lesson that people still didn't want to come and watch, except if the big players were there. So essentially what the Big Bash were doing were bringing the big players. I mean, Amelia Kerr was a big attraction for Brisbane Heat last year. Leah Tahuhu, obviously Amy was having her baby, so she wasn't available. But you look at Sophie Devine, she's the world's best number one, and she attracts
she's number one.
To watch her play. They've put a lot of money.
Did people turn? So Hussein, did people turn up to want to go watch Amelia Kerr play?
Yep, she was turning the ball
along the same lines as don't want to say Marcus Stoyan. Yeah. Rashid
No, not to that degree. So female sport is growing. Yeah, I mean, female sport is growing. What Cricket Australia did in 2015 is get the players to put money. So I think it was 20 million was invested in grassroots out of the players' funds. So that went into grassroots to allow girls programs to start. So what it did was they were investing in the grassroots, get girls to start playing. They put 2,000, I think it was, towards. So, Torrin said, I want to start a girls team. I've got a daughter, and there was $2,000 for you to start a cricket team. What it did though, that's sprinkling into the grassroots. So then what it does, it brings Amelia Kerr turns up. There's actually heroes that they can be a part of. Yep. Prior to that, there was no heroes. Belinda Clark and the Australian team won a World Cup long time ago, in India. So that there was, those heroes were there, but there was no one else. It
does work. Absolutely does work. My daughter's just turned 7 yesterday, and my son and I, my son's a cricket sports nut. rugby and cricket in particular. And so we're watching it. She'll come along and sit down with us for a few minutes and watch it and wander off, sort of thing. If there is women's sports on, totally different story. She will sit there and watch women's sport. Even if I'm not watching it or my son's not watching it, she'll watch the women's Big Bash, and she'll sit there and watch it. Girls want to see female role models in sport.
100%.
Absolutely.
And if they see them, they'll sit there and they'll watch them.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, because 2018, we were out as a family celebrating a family function at a pub. We're at a pub, and my daughter, those that know my daughter, she's a girl's girl. She's a princess, and that's what believes in fairies and princesses, and that's her life, right? And there's Women's Big Bash on the screen. She looks over, she goes, "Oh my God, Daddy, there's girls playing cricket. Look, there's a pink team and a purple team." The Hobart side's playing the Sydney Sixers side, and that was her first first engagement with cricket. Fast forward 18 months, she actually went through a superstar program this year purely because she wanted to play cricket. Because she thought, "Oh, do I get a pretty pink top?" No, you don't, but you get a nice gold black.
She didn't even want to watch Dad play cricket, but
she went there and she likes to bowl, and completely out of Cricket Australia's doing, nothing to do with anyone else.
Yeah, so I think you look at the materialistic view of the Big Bash, and that changed my view as well. Is that last year they got rid of, after the fires, they got rid of the fireworks, for example. That they used to have, the blitz that used to go off, when the game started and so forth, the loud music, the, basketball type of atmosphere, the music, the colors, the television, the loud, the live announcer, those sorts of things is what attracts people. So my perception of cricket has changed. It's now a carnival, so essentially we're selling tickets to an event. The Renegades were perfect. Motocross used to work with Renegades. So, for example, at halftime or before the game, you get to see this motorbike doing flips before the cricket game on the same field. So essentially that, changes your mindset. You're going for 3 hours, you're spending $20. What do you get from it? You watch bikes, you watch cricket, you watch, all these other things that sort of line up, apart from just it's 3 hours of cricket, and that attracts young girls, for example, young boys to the game. And also that's the other element, is they're playing cricket. I want to play cricket like that as well, Dad or Mum.
So, I'm hearing a big element is the investment in dollars, really, and that's what's helping to get that women's cricket, girls cricket really taking off in Australia. We just don't have the dollars in New Zealand, is it? So I'm sort of again mindful of time. So there's a few things that we just want to make sure we wrap up. And that's bringing the learnings from Australia and over here. So we're talking about women's cricket and women's Big Bash. How do we take learnings from Australia and achieve outcomes in New Zealand? Obviously, we don't have the dollars. What can we achieve?
Well, you've got the players. The players are here.
Sophie Devine, Susie Bates, Amelia Kerr.
What I guess, look at the male game and say what clicks, and look at 5 things that click in a male's game. And Taran, you've been there, you've seen it. What actually attracts people to come to the games? What does it mean for those kids that turn up and so forth? And how do we get that same model here in terms of females and coming? I think one of the big things is you got to understand WBBL doesn't charge to come watch a game unless it's a grand final semi. So they're not charging money. It's actually sponsors and television and so forth that are keeping them alive. Last year, they've gone standalone essentially as well. So I think it's how you actually sell the game. 100, for example, in the UK. No, you've got to go free. You can't charge in the first few years.
Got to go free. Under 16, you've got to go free. Absolutely. Nah. You've got to go free.
Aaron, you're saying under 16. Zane, was it free for under 16 or free for everybody?
Everybody. Not everybody. Except for grand final. That was the big one where they sold out per se.
Yeah.
But the rest of the games, I'll be honest, we had games in Ballarat that will probably only have 1,500 people or 1,000 people, but that's a country game essentially. So we're going to attract, people who are at a boutique ground. They only play at boutique grounds as well. So City Power Centre or Junction over where the home of Victorian cricket, we'd only get 200 people turn up. I used to get busloads of kids to come in.
That's a whole
lunch.
But that's all. That's all our New Zealand grounds. So boutique grounds is what New Zealand grounds are.
Correct. But if you take it back to a smaller ground in a state. Don't take it to Eden Park. Take it to a ground where you know people will actually come. It's centrally located, what Eden Park is, I guess. But and then have those other attractions outside of it.
What you're saying is, like, if you take the Hearts, and you take Hearts to Cornwall Park on a midweek on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and allow the club to dick it out and actually make some bar takings out of it, make it a community event, you'll probably get a bigger buy-in. Yep, agree.
Yep.
They did that at North Shore, and I think it worked really well. But on the flip side, the players involved really wanted an opportunity to play at Eden Park because they were tired of playing at Melville. That's their home ground.
Yep.
They wanted to feel part of being the men's event. So they wanted the main, the main fixture. Yeah. They didn't want to be They just didn't want to be those cousins that we didn't want, but they wanted to be included into the big.
And the other thing,
growing up as a kid. Yeah, sorry.
No. Go on.
I was just going to say, adding on to what Taryn's saying, as a player, you do want to be the one that's playing at Eden Park, and that's what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day as well, isn't it? You want to be playing at the big sports venues. That's why you want to achieve in these games and progress up.
100%.
I say very quickly, do the women's Big Bash players, they get paid, right?
Yep. You've got Harmanpreet Kaur, you've got world-class players that are coming to play. I think it was about 2014. You can probably do the research on that one. They tried to make like an IPL for women. It was an Australian backer, Singaporean or Malaysian Australian backer. It didn't. Fairbreak, I think it was called, Global. That tried to set it up. It didn't work. So that's where the Big Mash sort of had an opportunity, or WBBL had an opportunity to sort of try and get that model up. The players that came per se, they bought they attracted people. So Harmanpreet bought the Indian community to come and watch her play, for example. They didn't watch the team play, they actually watched her play, in that sense as well.
The reason I ask is that obviously in New Zealand, I don't know if times have changed, but last time I checked, the women's program didn't have paid contracts, the domestic players. So
I'm pretty sure it does now.
Yeah, I think it does now.
I mean, World Cup prior to World Cup.
About domestic players.
Domestic.
Right.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah, but not New Zealand contracted ones.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about Super Smash players. So a couple of years ago, I know a former player was out on the radio talking about the disparity between the men's game and the women's game, where when you have these double hitters, the women's final was played followed by the men's final.
Yeah,
the women's final, he was out on radio saying, hey, look, these girls were out there playing in a final, not getting paid with no prize money. However, the game after that followed had $100,000 prize money on it.
So
and
sort of
created a bit of a problem for the CPA, and it kind of carried on. So in the end, that's what I was trying to get at. If you start having them, do you need to have parity as well? We're trying to talk about going to boutique grounds, but the female counterparts actually want to be treated as equal.
And look, to be honest, is now, being at a premier cricket club I think our grassroots aren't as strong, and I might get in trouble for this, but our grassroots aren't as strong to then cater for that next generation, if that makes sense as well. So essentially, we need to strengthen our grassroots first and allow them to develop, and then you'll have a base of players, more Sophie Devines and so forth coming, that'll attract more people to watch the game. I think at current point in New Zealand, we're just a little bit behind in terms of, I guess, good players for people to have eyes on. And I'm not saying they're not good players at the moment. What I'm trying to say is that we need more good players in that sense. Because Australian cricket, in terms of playing numbers, would be very similar in that sense as well.
I reckon I go back to your other point. I think, and I'll fall on that side of the fence, because I think it's more the production and we don't promote the game. Like our Super Smash is very attractive. If you give our Super Smash men's one and you give it to an Australian production company, they will probably glam it up to a Big Bash within the budgets and make it good. Because the on-field cricket package is just as good, just as strong.
Yep.
I reckon. Especially this diluted 6 teams broken up into 8 is a diluted format. Take away the big pros, take away the Australian contracted players. I think the product is very good, and you'll probably find the same on the women's front as
Yep.
well. We just don't
Yeah.
sell it well enough. Sophie
Well, you
Devine,
could, yeah. I personally believe, I think,
full
you know,
international. I've never seen her on an ad.
yeah, no, spot on. And that's the difference between India and how they're growing so quickly, is sharing, you know, Nike on board with Harman and so forth. And also how Australia sells the game a little bit better. I think there's more eyes, but also in the same respect, they sell their female sportswomen really, really well. And there are role models then to look at these young girls going, I want to be Sophie. I want to be Amelia Kerr, for example.
Hey
Yeah,
guys,
we
I'm just
probably need
gonna
to celebrate them more, eh? Yeah, celebrate.
just
Not
just gonna
necessarily sell them. I think.
just going to grab a few questions out of the old chat room actually, because I've actually made an executive decision. We'll go on about 10 minutes over time. We'll do a bit of extra time. We've got a drawn match, so we're going to go into some extra time. But just a couple of questions out. I think we're going to get agreement on this one, but it's just like what Simon Hughes sort of mentioning, the fact is that India here is too much of a stronger, is too strong. The influence of India is too strong in the game. And I think we're probably going to agree with that. But the fact is that it's the devil that we have to dance with, because they're the ones that bring the biggest dollars into the game.
Unfortunately, yes.
But that's the market. Why would you say what's wrong with it? It's the market.
It's
The
well,
market,
exactly. It's the market. It's market influence that
That's right.
supply and demand, right?
supply and
want
demand.
They're
But
paying
it does
things
mean
that
that there can be detrimental effects to other countries because of the drivers that are being driven by a higher market force. We see that in general day-to-day commerce as well. It's no different.
Spot on.
we just need
And
the
then,
Chinese
and then
to get on
also,
board.
and then I haven't heard about this actually, so I'm going to take it on face value that it's correct. Spark Sport having Hindi commentaries, will it work?
So you just
Is that
got to
happening?
turn on your
I-
Indian box and you get all the.
Say that again, Hussein. I was talking over you,
I
mate.
don't know about that.
You get all the options on the satellite dish box. You know, the boxes you get, Star Plus and so forth. But I think the Big Bash we were looking at last year, I think we got a bit of a pickle. At one point, the Stars played against. The Stars played. Harris Ralph can speak English. He dodged it. He dodged a bullet in the first one and said, I can't speak English. We didn't have an interpreter. My Hindi, unfortunately, wasn't good. Sandeep Lamachani was there. He's a Nepalese who speaks Hindi. He then did it. But what it did, though, is everyone started saying, why don't we have Hindi commentary? And the Big Bash will grow heavily if there was Hindi commentary there. So I think that's a great thing if they do get it on board, because more people will watch the game and they'll get to understand the game, I think, a little bit better if they don't actually, like listening to Mark Richardson or others.
Is that catering to the Indian market, or is that catering to the South Asians within Australasia? Who is that directed towards, this Hindi commentary?
I think it was, this one anyway was Fox and so forth having an option. So I don't know much about Spark, unfortunately.
Yeah. Is it true that Spark is actually looking at doing the Hindi commentary?
I don't know. It's just like I'm not sure whether Simon's saying that's it's something that should happen, or
yeah.
Well, okay. Look, I'll butt in there for sure. For there, what I'm hoping to do, there is a new head of cricket content for Spark that's been announced officially soon. It hasn't actually been officially. I jumped the gun this morning on sports briefing on New Zealand Sports Radio this morning, but it hasn't been officially announced. But it will be in shortly. I'm hoping to get him onto our show, Swinging from the Hip, and that'll be a question that we can definitely ask to him.
Sweet.
Yeah. Moving along, and so Taryn was talking about, ladies Big Bash, women's Big Bash, or not Big Bash, sorry, but Super Smash, being played at Eden Park, out of Rover. Obviously, all the Super Smash played out of. What about more of the men's going out to more of the club grounds, or just cricket in general at that provincial level going out to the club grounds? How do we feel about that? Our local community seeing the guys closer to them.
You need the
if
wickets.
they're not coming to you.
The wickets need to stand up.
So you need to have the quality.
The quality wickets. Wickets need to stand up. And no disrespect to the female counterparts, but they don't necessarily play at 130 clicks and above, right? So the wickets don't have. So the health and safety factor isn't there. But if you go to a club ground and Lockie Ferguson steaming in, that pitch needs to stand up. One
Played
for
three games. Three games for
Eh?
Parnell last year.
yeah, yeah.
he
You're
was
lucky
all right.
for-
And he's probably coming off 6 paces, but he'll probably steam it a bit
that's true.
quicker.
Yeah.
And
It's-
you know,
He'll
they
still
need-
get it to stand up.
Yeah, there's a health and safety aspect. There is the wickets need to be true, so you can offer a good product, and you need the game to go to 40 overs, right? Let's
So
be honest.
How do
Cricket
players
was
develop
played
though,
at
T?
Eh?
How do players develop if they're not getting good quality wickets?
Wickets only keep getting better as you go higher and higher.
Yeah.
So it needs to keep
Mm.
getting better. But they played first class cricket at Cornwall Park many years ago. I pushed the
Yeah.
side screen, so I know.
Colin Maiden.
I was getting
I'm sure they
Colin
played
Maiden.
some.
Colin
When they
Maiden,
played at
Colin
Colin
Maiden got
Maiden?
some good pitches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when
Yeah.
the 2010 World Cup was on in New Zealand, Rugby
Yep.
World Cup. So Colin Maiden is Auckland's second home ground. Korori Park, Wellington play out ground fixture used to play at Korori Park.
Corey.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, you can go out, but there's the political side. If you leave Eden Park for too long and go somewhere else, then rugby will take over and cricket will get the boot. So you've got to stay in house and be the 50-50 tenants as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose so. There's just a few questions out of the old chat room, and then just to wrap it up, bring it up. We talked about the women's cricket and how they can leverage what Australia's doing over here and the elements that they can do. The diversity side of things. What side of things, in terms of, and you're possibly involved in it, I don't know, but diversity developments in New Zealand and in Auckland or throughout the country?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not. I've taken a role in a non-diverse sort of area, or more Asian-populated Remuera, Parnell in Auckland. But I know the work that New Zealand cricket are doing, or understand the work. Hopefully, I get to know more and more about it, because we have an array of South Asians that are coming through state cricket. And I think in club cricket, you look around the clubs, or last year's lists anyway, you've got a high population of South Asians that are coming through as well, male and female. So I look at our Parnell female team. We've got 2 South Asians, and one of them's contracted to ND. So you sort of say, Papatoi, for example, high population of Samoan. There are actually a lot of Samoans that are playing in the female team there. So essentially they are working, the system's working, but I guess it's the next step. How do we get them into the high performance programs? How do we develop them? Those sorts of things.
They're overseas players. There's 4 Samoan international players that come over from Samoa.
There you go.
for basically upskilling purposes. Because
Yeah.
Samoa are 15th in the world in women's cricket, I think. 15th
wow.
or 17th.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're not too bad. Hey, before you do get away though, Hussein, Big Bash, Trans-Tasman bubble, limited cricket with the rest of the world. How would Cricket Australia view opening up the Big Bash for this year? Will they be receptive of New Zealand players coming in and creating a little bracket for them, or is it going to be a close shot? What do you reckon?
I think it's a bit of a COVID hit. Media don't know what to do. Let's build a story, because essentially this was spoken about a while back, 2-3 seasons when I first started. It was the talk at that time. We had enough Kiwis to sort of implement sort of a team, or have spots in the team. I guess the big one is that we've got enough talent. It's television viewership. So at the end of the day, everything is about viewership. And if New Zealanders like Spark jump on board, massive, it'll work. The TV audience here in New Zealand for Big Bash is big. So essentially the product is good. And the Kiwi players are playing per se, right? So how do we then sell that back in and say we've got enough talent? I think you spoke about this last week, enough talent here for us to actually bring our own team rather than you picking and choosing. And we can bring 2 Kiwi coaches. You've got Daniel Vittori, you've got Stephen Fleming, McCullum. You've got coaches there that are in the system
You've
as
got
well.
a general manager there.
Lee Jamon,
Yeah.
a bowling coach.
Simon Inslee. He's
bowling
the
coach.
general manager for Hobart Hurricanes.
You got a bowling coach in Andre Adams, Shane Bond. You've got coach. All the players are there. So essentially, what it is, Spark would have to buy into it. It's all about money and dollars and TV audience at the end of the day. And I think the model that you've got to, if you can bring that one team, it'll be great. But I don't know with where Australian cricket at current point is sitting, would it happen anytime soon?
Yeah. What about
Hey, look,
PNG?
yep.
PNG. People, is there a big PNG community in Australia?
No, the TV viewership is very expensive
in
to play.
Australia, in PNG. Is there a big
people watch it, but essentially it's look at rugby league, for example. It's in that sense as well. Rugby league, they've got a team, I think, in the New South Wales or Queensland Cup, and they don't get the followers in that sense as well. So it's I think the talent is there, no doubt. They're playing Premier Cricket, Vanuatu and other Pacific teams. They're there, but it's just I don't think the TV viewership is there.
Okay, we're gonna have to wrap it up real soon. So we're gonna take this last one from Simon again in terms of Champions League. Super Smash gets to play the winner of the Big Bash. What do you reckon? IPL, CPL.
Look, I thought about this, Simon. Great question, great call, great minds think alike. Somebody's going to turn up, and somebody has to turn up with a lot of cash and say, "Hey, you're going to play one-off fixture for $100,000 or $250,000 or something." You've got to put some context and meaning.
$1 big on the team.
Yeah, like remember that Stanford $1 million game?
Yep.
The guy went bankrupt and corrupt.
The fraud went to jail. That guy.
Pre-bankruptcy when Chris Gale never going to let go of their money, $1 million.
The winner of Big Bash and the winner of Super Smash playing Papua New Guinea. There you go.
Why?
Sorted it. In TV audience all around the but it would work. It's just timing of the year, and I guess the big thing about Big Bash is attraction of overseas players and WBBL, in that sense as well, is the attraction of the players. So having the likes of the better players, the Staines, the Ralphs, the Lamachanis and so forth, they're only there for a limited period. So essentially the only issue would be people come to see these stars. They don't come to see the team. They come to see the players, from what I've learned anyway.
I know Ashwin wants to close up, but this kind of tournament, Hussein, you should remember this, took place back in, I would say, late 90s, early 2000s, when they had the champions of different countries playing.
South Africa. It was in South
Victoria
Africa.
won.
What?
Yeah.
Victoria won it.
Or somewhere. It was Central Districts, and a couple of other championship-winning teams turned up and played in some random Champions League.
Auckland went to the one in South Africa. There was a Champions League type format in South Africa. Auckland went there. One of Louis Vincent's last tournaments.
No. You're talking about life after IPL. I'm talking about well before the time. This is
Victoria went across. They were called the Bushrangers, I think, then. And they went across and they ended up winning it, because I remember the big fake check sitting in one of the offices of the general manager of Cricket Vic, and he loved it, in that sense.
Now, see if they get something for it.
Oh yeah, they need it. But mate, that'll be a brilliant idea. All the tournaments around the world, it's a massive opportunity to bring them together, all the winners per se. But a lot of those guys like the Gales, Dale Staines, and these guys, they play for several franchises, so it'll be tricky when it's time to sort of, who do you choose? Who's got the bigger dollars? I think. Yeah,
exactly. Oh, it pays
more. Question of money. I think we better wrap it up before we lose all our listeners that are still there with us. Hey, Hussein, thank you for being on the show with us. It's been awesome. It's really been enlightening in terms of particularly about how cricket works overseas, diversity, the Women's Big Bash. So it's been very informative hour, or well over an hour now, actually, into extra time. So to everybody out there, or just please make sure you hit those like buttons, you hit those share buttons, download the content down to your podcasting listening machines. We've got the morning sports briefs happening on New Zealand Sport Radio, so tune into those. They're on it at 7 o'clock in the morning now, so that you can make sure that you've got your sporting news fixed before you hit the streets going to work. We've got Do You Know It's Sport on Wednesday night, so if you want to get on that show, you got your team, drop us a line and we'll get you on there. If you just want to watch, be in there and watch, and all the the hour-long chats during the day as well. Look, this has been a great bringing you Swing from the Hips again, episode 4. And we will see you back here Thursday, 8 p.m, same bat time, same bat channel here on New Zealand Sport Radio. Thank you very much.